The Resident Evil series has been doing something pretty amazing lately. Not only is the franchise still going even after it started way back in 1996 with the first Resident Evil game, it has also been side by side releasing remakes of all its old games, making them more modernized. Resident Evil 7 came out in 2017, then came Resident Evil 2 Remake in 2019, then came Resident Evil 3 Remake in 2020, then came Resident Evil Village in 2021. And now finally, probably the most famous Resident Evil game of all time, Resident Evil 4, the remake has been officially released last week, to almost perfect review scores, and from what I've seen so far, it really does deserve the 10 out of 10 rating. These remakes have been coming out to maximum praise and are showing other companies what should happen when you remaster an old game into modern era, and EA has followed suit with their Dead Space 1 remake as well. So in the words of some high-level Resident Evil fans, all the golden era games have been remastered. But where do we go from here? Resident Evil 4 was considered by many to be the perfect survival horror game, with plenty of actions and scares all around. But with the praise of Resident Evil 4 getting, Capcom started developing Resident Evil 5 starring Chris and Sheva. In this game, the horror was turned down and the action was ramped up. And let's just say a lot of people were not happy with this change, especially with what was led to happen with Resident Evil 6. A lot of people say Resident Evil 5 is what started the downfall of the Resident Evil series, with Resident Evil 7 finally getting it back on track. Well, I have something to tell you all. Resident Evil 5 was my favorite until Resident Evil 7 came out, actually.
She can't do that. Shoot her or something.
Yes, I know it's weird to hear anyone say Resident Evil 5 was their favorite, but it was for a couple of things. It was my first Resident Evil game I could ever beat. It was my first introduction into the Resident Evil franchise. I had a PS3 back then, and even though I had Resident Evil 4 on PS2, and even though I had Resident Evil 4 on PS2, with PS3 being backwards compatible, I picked Resident Evil 5 for some reason to do first. And a more personal reason is one of the very few memories I have playing a video game with my dad. My dad actually bought the game for himself because he actually played the Resident Evil series. But after finally playing throughout all the original games and now slowly working on the remasters, this video is actually slowing me down from completing the Resident Evil 2 remaster, so you're welcome. Then Resident Evil 3, then hopefully, after enough begging and pleading, one of my employees in the Discord to buy me the Resident Evil 4 remake. If you aren't in the Discord, you won't get this joke, so join it below. Anyway, this video intro has gone on way too long, and I want to get back into playing the remakes, fuckers, so let's finally look into
Resident Evil 5.
The story begins in Africa, playing as Chris Redfield, and for anybody who only played Resident Evil 4 when they were a child because of how good everyone said it was, were shocked to not see their boy toy Leon was leading in this game. Before flowing hair handsome fellow came around, Chris was the main star of Resident Evil back in Resident Evil 1, unless you decide to play through the Jill storyline. And if you haven't played Resident Evil 1 and 2, there are going to be interactions here that will have history that your 9-year-old brain will not understand. Chris meets up with Sheva, a character so infamous for her bad AI that she has only appeared once as a main protagonist, and that was this game. Every other time she has appeared, it was only been in the mercenaries mode, but she has never appeared again as an actual character like Ada, Clara, or Rebecca. Capcom literally wrote her out of the RE franchise, basically, which is such a shame because as a character, but you only have to worry about her if you give your friend the spare controller that has stick drift. The main person we want to talk about is Chris Redfield. Chris has been sent by the BSAA, the Bioterrorist Police is what I call it, to investigate bioterrorism that has been happening here in Africa. As you get to walk around the area before action begins, you feel like Piper Pierre on the couch, only this time you're wearing a strap-on 9mm caliber. Once you grab your gear that the BSAA provided for you, a handgun with 1 mag worth of ammo by the way, you begin your adventure tracking down the source of the bioterrorism and completing Christopher Columbus's Look, I'm not gonna lie. If you showed someone this game without context in 2023, it could look really bad. I don't think anything was mentioned in the previous game that said that Chris himself had to go to specifically Africa, but this is the way the story continued. So let's leave it at that. I can already smell Twitter crumb-filled keyboards releasing toxic gas from old food as they type. Along the way, trying to find another BSAA team that were a lot better equipped than you run into creatures infected with Ouroboros. Chris then realizes that this is Albert Wesker's doing, and has flashbacks from a time that him and Jill originally went after Wesker, and apparently killed him by Jill throwing herself at him and falling out of a castle straight from a movie Frankenstein. By the way, this story honestly should have been the next game after Resident Evil 4. It would have set up 5 a little better. Like make it Resident Evil 4.5 or something. I don't know. You do get to play this flashback in a DLC mission, but that's literally it. How did they know it was Wesker? What happened between Resident Evil 1 and now? Oh yeah, remember when I said that if you didn't play the others, you wouldn't get the back history? Albert Wesker, to my 20-year-old surprise when I first played it, was a squad mate of Chris back in Resident Evil 1, as well as Jill, Chris's old partner. That's where the story comes in. Wesker betrayed them, and hence the hatred that Chris has over Wesker's handsome jawline. There is so much backstory here, we have barely talked about the buff KFC Colonel Chris Redfield. Look at the size of this man since Resident Evil 1. While Leon was trying to escape the maze of Raccoon City Police Department, Chris was hitting the gym getting ready to bully Africa, apparently. Once it's found out that Wesker is involved, it's also found out that Jill is alive somehow. It's never explained. Jill is alive and being mind-controlled, so what do you do to stop her mind control? You shoot her and tear off the bug implant on her chest that leaves a gaping hole in her. Then leave her there, hopefully survive, because you are hell-bent on killing Wesker. And people thought Connor going after Charles Lee was motivated in Assassin's Creed 3. Wesker has gotten more powerful since Resident Evil 1, infected with Ouroboros that made him the perfect human. Basically, he can move fast and has incredible strength, and if you piss him off enough, the Ouroboros starts to show and slowly take over. While the game takes place in Africa, you will be brought to multiple areas. A village, mine system, swamp area, and a fucking active volcano where Chris is going to single-handedly punch boulders near lava. This is the part most people remember from this game. Resident Evil has never been the most realistic game ever, but apparently this was too far for most, but Mr. X punching walls and surviving truck crashes was believable. We have people in real life who can move trains and pick up boulders, but Chris punching one loose and pushing it was too much for the world to handle. Anyway, you go around slaughtering hundreds of infected, save Jill, listen to Wesker's one-liners that have now become infamous thanks to Dead by Daylight adding Wesker as a killer, then nuke the guy with a rocket launcher while he swims in lava. That was the only way to kill him, apparently. Wesker's main goal in this game was to spread Ouroboros, and I guess he was using Africa to test it. You see, only certain people can be successful in hosting Ouroboros. Think of Marvel's symbiotes and how if they can't bond with the host, they outright kill them. If someone can't bond with Ouroboros, they turn into either zombies, or if someone really can't bond with Ouroboros, they turn into these monsters. The game's story is honestly a wild ride, from casually driving a boat through the swamps, to suddenly fighting the dragon dildo with a face with a mounted 50 cal machine gun on a boat. The craziness is what I loved about this game, and if they do keep going on remasters, I absolutely hope they keep this craziness. The gameplay is pretty traditional, but with all my look intos, I must include at least 2 sections so I can finally look at the clock and see it's 2 AM and go, oh thank God, only one more section, and then I can go to bed and wake up in 4 hours to get ready for work. Why do I do this to myself? The gameplay is ripped straight out of Resident Evil 4. The tank controls is what my dad called them, and that's because these specifically trained people can't move and shoot unless it's a cutscene until one more game. These controls were the biggest reason I never played the Resident Evil franchise until basically the last 5 years. These controls made me want to unalive, and it did many times as I desperately tried to find a good place to shoot, then get sworn because the BSAA only sent me a handgun with 1 magazine to fight off hundreds of people. You do, of course, come across other guns and can even buy them from an unknown merchant in between levels. I guess they couldn't really bring back the merchant from Resident Evil 4. The weapons all feel good in this game, it's just the controls, but once you finally adjust yourself to them, it's not bad at all. Capcom clearly developed 4 and 5 to have these controls, so they do work, just not the biggest fan of them in the world. With all the changes that Resident Evil 4 brought to the series, what did they do to make it different here? You get to do it twice now. Not only you manage Chris, you also manage Sheva's inventory as well. That's another person who can carry herds and ammos for you, But you also have smaller pouches, and Sheva will use stuff without you knowing. If you are low on health but don't want to heal yet, Sheva doesn't care. She is going to drop everything she was attempting to do to come heal you, and she will heal you with anything at random. You could be almost dead but want to save the first aid spray for later use. Maybe Sheva should come save you with a double green herb instead. Well, that's up for Sheva to decide, not you. Best way to counter this is to get your buddy to play co-op with you. That way it's back to just managing yourself. Sheva will also fight, of course, depending on the weapons you give her. You can also upgrade her weapons, and pretty much anything you can do to yourself, you can do to Sheva. So maybe think twice before giving her the rocket launcher, for she will use it on the weakest enemy there if they show up first. I will say this personally about Sheva, I've never really had an issue with her AI. The only issue I really have was that she would go through ammo like crazy. She won't use her knife, by the way, that must have been too advanced at the time. So I usually gave her the shotgun and a pistol, let her keep all the shotgun ammo and some handgun, while I held everything else like the sniper and machine guns. Combat besides the tank controls can be really fun as well. Just like Resident Evil 4, if you shoot a zombie in specific areas, you can stun them, opening them up to a powerful melee attack. These melee attacks say they are powerful, but I feel like I need to do 3 of them on one zombie for them to go down, or do 5 headshots with a pistol. It's a great way to deal damage and save ammo. Because of this tactic, I only ran out of ammo in some endgame levels. Enemies in Resident Evil 5 have also gotten stronger since Resident Evil 4. Instead of coming after you with just farming tools, they come after you with fucking rifles and miniguns. And let me just say, going after a minigun guy with a knife because they tanked all your bullets is not going to work. Pro tip, if you come across mines, keep them for endgame series. Give them to Sheva to hold. I don't think she will use them, so they should be safe with her. Other enemies include Ouroboros monsters. One is a scorpion that can fly, one is straight up just giant Ouroboros, and then there is Wesker and the Jill fights. Wesker will team up with mind-controlled Jill to hunt you down and beat your ass. But because Wesker is like a cat who plays with his food before he eats it, he decides to slowly walk to you and only move fast when you shoot at him. Meanwhile, Jill will just throw you around everywhere.
7 minutes. 7 minutes is all I can spare to play with you.
After 7 minutes, Wesker leaves and you are now able to subdue Jill by shooting her. But it's okay, she's alive! Hopefully, that is a big chest cavity. Wesker thinks he's better than everyone and literally looks at you as someone who is beneath him, hence why he doesn't give 2 shits about you in the beginning. But when you start to foil his plan, he starts coming after you. Not like Mr. X in Resident Evil 2, only when it's time for a boss fight. Best ways to defeat Wesker in his boss fight is to distract him, turning off the light so that Corey Hart over here can't see with his sunglasses on at night. Was that reference explained enough for all my Gen Z fans out there? Then in one boss fight, you shoot a fucking RPG at his head and he catches the damn rocket, only for you to shoot it in his hands. After you do that for a while, you inject him with the COVID vaccine, and it starts making him lose control of Ouroboros. And fuck it, the battle isn't cinematic enough in this factory. Boom, you are now on an active volcano.
You're too late, Chris. It's Weskin time.
Keep shooting him until he gives up. Punch some boulders, stab the absolute shit out of this guy because clearly knives will work instead of bullets, and then finish it all off with a rocket while he swims in lava.
Hasta la vista, baby.
And bam, you did it. You beat Resident Evil 5.
That was for our fallen brothers.
The game, like I have said many times, was awesome to me, and replaying it brought back a lot of memories with my dad. I honestly didn't think they were going to remake Resident Evil 4 since the game was said to be perfect, but they did, and holy crap, they took the holy grail of Resident Evil and gave it a polish. The game, from what I have heard, is amazing and I can't wait to play it for myself. But because it actually got remade, it got me thinking. Will Resident Evil 5 get the same treatment? Why would they stop doing this when it has been so successful for them since the beginning with Resident Evil 2 Remake? Will they actually remake Resident Evil 6? Will they redeem themselves on what is considered to be the 2 worst Resident Evil games of all time? I don't know. I don't work at Capcom. But I really hope they do remake at least Resident Evil 5. I think they could actually do it. Plus, it would be nice to see Sheva again, and seeing Buff Chris remade would be amazing to see. This game means a lot to me, so the remake of this game would literally turn the nostalgia knob to 11 for me. So here's hoping they do. Hi, Future Juby here. After voice recording these lines, I looked up the possibility of an RE5 remake, and apparently RE5 was one of the highest grossing Resident Evil games of all time. So it is believed that the RE5 remake is basically all but confirmed. This gives me a little more hope that it's going to happen. And if it does, you can bet your ass you will see more info on it here. So like this video if you enjoyed, and subscribe to see if the Resident Evil 5 remake actually happens. See you all next week.